Hello and welcome to the Dragon's Lair podcast in association with Riverside Sports Bar, the home of live sport and great food in Newport. I'm Jamie and join me as always is Gavin Thomas. How are we doing, Gav? Busy
Um,
weekend?
an exceptionally busy weekend here. My son's birthday, also organising Sussex Cup finals and refereeing minis rugby and coaching minis rugby this morning. So,
Fair play
uh,
to you. Fair play. Now, you've not had a very good sporting weekend results-wise, have you? Do you want to tell us about it?
no, well, I've had a very good sporting weekend all year, to be honest. So, clearly, support Wales, men's and women's, not a good season. Support Dragons, clearly, not a good season.
Obviously. Yeah.
Football-wise, Newport County,
Yeah.
just avoided relegation. Hastings United, my local club, they got relegated yesterday. Southampton, the other football club I follow, they also lowest points total ever in the Premier League at the minute. And
Relegated. Yeah.
yeah, and the rugby club I play for, we're really struggling for players. So, but
But
my
other than
my
that, it's all going well.
but my minis are unbeaten in the last two tournaments they've been in. So,
Oh, that's
uh,
something, isn't it?
yeah, I'll take that.
It is something. I'm amazed Evervale haven't been
Yeah,
affected yet by your
Yeah, yeah.
been
supporting
down.
Well,
team scares,
I,
Gav.
I don't want to mention Ebervale because they're the only ones who've done well, to be honest. And
Until today.
yeah,
You've cursed them now.
yeah, they'll
You've
lose to
cursed them.
Carmarthen in the playoffs, and Rob, you can blame me.
Right. Okay. So unfortunately, Gav can't join us this week. He's been busy on a stag, bless him. But we do have a special guest with us. We have Rob Rees from the SRC podcast. Hello, Rob. How are we?
Yeah, all good, gents. Unlike Gavin, I'm currently watching Liverpool's Premier League title
Oh, of
campaign.
course. Yes, they did
So
win the league today, didn't they? Yeah.
we're at the other end of the spectrum here, I think, Gav. So
Yeah,
you stay as far away from Ebervale as possible at the moment. We'll have a good season.
Rob is riding high. He is riding high. And he's not a Dragon supporter, so he's not going to be affected by the misery either, is he? So he's going to be fine. Okay, let's get into some news then. So in terms of re-signings, Dragons have re-signed winger Jared Rosser and Lucid prop Dylan Keller-Griffiths. Good news, Gav. We're happy with those re-signings, aren't
yeah,
we?
Jared's a solid player, and I think Dylan's stood up well in every game he's played in, hasn't he?
Yeah. He plays for Pontypool, doesn't he, Rob? Is that right? Dylan
Yeah,
Keller-Griffiths?
he's been with Pontypool now for probably 3 or 4 seasons. I think this is probably the first season where he's played more and starting to transition into that sort of first team. So it's probably just rewards, to be honest. And I think he's one of those transitioning up that you'll go, yeah, I think he'll go quite well. Obviously, he's very young for the position he's playing, so it'll take a few years. But yeah, definitely one to watch.
What's the quality of scrummaging like in the SRC generally, Rob?
It probably splits, I would say. You can probably say 60-40. Or actually, probably 70-30. Let's include Quins in this. That there's probably 7 solid, good competitive packs, a lot of experience, in the front rows, which is something I think that's underestimated
Oh,
within
yeah.
development quality. So he's been up against it since coming into the Premiership. In terms of his opposition, he's been holding his own. So yeah, I think is one of those ones. It can be hit and miss, but overall, it's pretty solid.
Yeah, good stuff. I've been impressed with Dylan Keller-Griffiths, actually.
Yeah,
I
so
think
far.
he's acquitted himself quite well, hasn't he? So, yeah, good news on Jared as well. Before Judgment Day, he hadn't scored a try for a year. And now he's scoring tries for fun, which is quite funny. But no, very good re-signings by the club. And then in terms of new signings, so it was announced this week that Levi Douglas is signed from French side Biarritz. Experienced 29-year-old who had stints in the English Premiership, top 14, and now Pro D2. 6'5" and weighs 20 stone. Yes, please, we'll have some of that. I didn't know he was Welsh qualified. That surprised me. So he's Welsh qualified for his grandfather. But very interesting signing. We've been talking a lot, Gavin, about having a big, gnarly bastard lock, and Levi Douglas fits that bill, doesn't he?
Yeah, and when he played at Bath, saw him a couple of times. Thought, yeah, I like him. He's old-fashioned. There's nothing fancy about him. He's certainly not a hybrid player. He picks the ball up, he runs in the straight line, and hopes people, expects people to stop him, which is pretty much all you want from a second row, really.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a big lad. He's made 16 appearances, or it might be 17 after this week. I'm not sure, but he's made 16 appearances, mostly off the bench. it looks to me like he's an impact player. That's how Beavett's use him. That's his role. And I think that'd be great for us to have someone coming off the bench make an impact like that. Because at the moment on our bench, we don't have anybody coming on making an impact,
No.
do we?
And fitness-wise, I think if you're a 6'5", 20-stone bloke, you're not always going to be able to do 80 minutes here.
No, absolutely not. So yeah, I'm pleased with our signing. I think it's pretty good. We needed a second row enforcer, but like always with the Dragons, we've been here before, haven't we? We were very excited about the overseas signings last year, Cummins and
we thought
Funaki and Wilson.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got to be careful. But no, on paper at least it's pretty decent signing. Well, there's something that caught my eye then. So this is from OFM, who are a radio station in South Africa. They're saying that the Toyota Cheetahs are set to lose one of their standout performers of the past year to an overseas club. So this is Robert Hunt, who we've spoken about before, Gav. He hails from Hermanus in the Western Cape. He will be heading to Wales, where he will link up with the Dragons. Interesting article this. It says, Hunt has been a real standout for the Cheetahs, and together with loosehead prop Cameron Dawson, the duo has had a similar impact to that of a bomb squad for the team. This is a big blow from the Cheetahs, who recently also lost the services of another tight head prop, Lawrence Victor. So they're saying it's a blow to the Cheetahs, to lose this guy, and he's had a really good impact. So that's encouraging, at least, isn't it? I mean, I've never heard of the guy, but as long as he can scrummage, we'll be happy with that, won't we?
I don't spend a lot of time watching Curry Cup rugby, I suppose. So, it's...
But we'll have to take their word for it. But,
yeah.
a scrummaging South African tight head, that sounds pretty good to me, doesn't it?
Just scrummaging tight head, I wouldn't care where they came from.
No, that's true. That's true. That's fair enough.
Could come from Azerbaijan for all I care, as long as they can scrummage.
Yeah, fair enough. In terms of departures then, so I don't know if you saw this article today
I
from
did
Wales
read
Online.
It, yeah.
Ben James from Wales Online is reporting that George Knott has signed for Cardiff. So we knew about this a few weeks ago. We didn't say on the pod because we couldn't really. He told Gareth that he was signed for Cardiff. So we knew about this for a little while. The headline is quite funny though. The headline reads, Cardiff set to sign Welsh qualified star from rivals. I mean, look, I like George Knott a lot. I think he's a very good player. He's a steady Eddie, very dependable. I wouldn't call him a star. I would not call George Knott a star.
No, and it makes sense for him to go to Cardiff because he's got young kids. They're settled in Newport, aren't they? It makes complete sense. I think, if the signing, so Douglas got signed in, if Seb Davis comes through as well, as suggested, then I think he'd be well down the pecking order anyway, wouldn't he?
I would have kept George Knott. Apparently, he did want to stay. He wanted to stay at the Dragons, but we just didn't offer him a contract. We got cut out cloth. We have to let players go. It's a shame. I like George Knott. I've met him in person a couple of times. Really nice guy. Like I said, he's a steady Eddie. He's never going to set the world on fire. And perhaps he doesn't have the grunt and the physicality you want a second row, but I always liked him. I thought he was a very dependable player.
I think that's my issue for me. He was always kind of caught between two things. He was not quite quick enough to be a 6 and not quite big enough to be a second row.
No. The article says, having made 18 appearances last season, minutes have been a little harder to come by for Knott this season. Philo Tia having already moved to bolster his second row stocks for next season. I mean, that completely knows the fact that he's been out with concussion and had a knee injury.
Yeah.
He's out with a knee injury at the moment. That's why he hasn't played much for Dragons, and he has suffered with concussion the past couple of seasons, which has been a bit of a concern, actually.
And he would have got in the side if he wasn't injured. Like, he's getting in over Bowney, Langdon Cryer and Joe Davis, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Of course, yeah. But no, good luck to him. Hope he goes well at Cardiff. I'll be disappointed to see him go, but players come and go, and you have to cut your cloth accordingly, don't you, as the old saying goes. Right, significant news then from last week. Dan Lydiate. He will hang up his boots at the end of the season. So Lydiate won 72 caps for Wales alongside 3 test appearances on the 2013 British and Irish Lions Tour to Australia. Lydiate also took part in 3 World Cups along with 2 Six Nations winning campaigns and was named Player of the Championship after the 2012 Grand Slam. He will continue in his role as Dragons breakdown coach next season. So we knew this moment was coming, but Dan Lydiate, the legend that is Dan Lydiate, one of the greatest ever players to play for the Dragons, has hung up his boots. Let's come to you then, Rob. Dan Lydiate, your thoughts and memories of Dan?
Yeah, do you know what? He's probably one of those players that a lot of people, will sort of underrate, or especially outside of Wales. He reminds me a bit of James Hook. Absolutely stacks of caps and big moments and sort of silverware in the bag. But people don't really look at him as sort of, if you was to ask someone, name your top 5, 10 sort of blindsides, he's probably not going to start appearing in a lot of people's sort of minds, especially those who don't follow rugby week in, week out. But he personified a sort of a era. The chop tackle was made his own, and that's obviously become more and more potent as we've sort of seen targeting around lowering the tackle height and a sort of chopping the man and allowing competition around the breakdown. And I think it probably is the right time. He's probably at that sort of stage, and he's having a solid time with it at the moment. He hasn't gone a year too far. He's not giving it up a year too early. But it's one of those ones you look back at some of the photos of him, and one of the ones that the Dragons put up was one of him in the Ebervale jersey, and it's that's a long time ago. That he was sort of up at Eugene Cross. But I mean, what an absolute legend of the game, really. Such a nice bloke off it as well. Just gets on with things, quietly gets on with on and off the field sort of stuff. And I think he's one of those ones. He's gonna be difficult to replace, but you'd hope that with Wales's fortunes of the last decade in churning out back rowers, that there's someone out there that'll quickly fill that sort of a Lydiate-sized hole.
Yeah. Gavin, Dan Lydiate, thoughts and memories
Yeah,
of a legend?
I think he's a great player. And I don't think we've ever replaced him. We've created sevens, like Rob said. We knock out sevens like nobody's business. But and I love a properly balanced back row. A veteran carrier at 7, big ball carrier at 8, and somebody who just knocks people over at 6. And we don't have that in Wales at the minute. And Lydiate was the king of it. British Irish Lion, tons of caps, was in that that Galactico era Ospreys team, as well as doing very well for Dragons. Just an absolute consummate professional.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember though, back in 2007, I think we all remember this, when Dan was only 19 and he was playing for Dragons against Perpignan, and he broke his neck. He actually ruptured all 6 major ligaments in his neck, fractured vertebra, and crushed a disc at the top of his spine. The doctors told him, "You may never walk again." That's what they said to him. And yet he went on to have an amazing career. I just think it's such a brilliant story. What a comeback. What a fantastic achievement. To come back from that and to go on to be, one of Wales's best ever flankers. Outstanding.
Oh God, I would argue in the professional era, Wales is best 6 by quite some way.
Yeah. Do you remember the 2012 Wales Grand Slam? So that game, the Grand Slam decided against France. I was there for that one. And Dan Lydiate was phenomenal that day. There's clips of this on YouTube. They got the game up and they got clips of Dan Lydiate on there. Absolutely phenomenal that game. You knew you was witnessing a defensive masterclass. He had deux sur trois in his back pocket all day. It was absolutely amazing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's the thing that stands out for me. And that is one of the games. 6 has to control that kind of narrow channel. And again, like you say, deux sur trois, they did not know what to do. He couldn't make an inch of ground.
No.
But then when France did get the ball moving, like he was cutting the centres, he was everywhere.
Yeah, outstanding player. Brilliant player, brilliant career. And I'm glad he's staying at the Dragons as well. As breakdown coach, I think that's important. The knowledge and experience he'll have to pass on to the young players, I think that's quite important. So, sad times. We knew he was coming, but what an absolute legend. So, Dan Lydiate, we salute you. Right, let's talk Super Rygbi Cymru then, because that's where we got Rob on the pod. So, as we all know, the Dragons have been hopeless in the URC. However, in the SRC, things are much different. Gwent Rugby is thriving. All 3 Gwent teams finished in the top 5 of the table and will compete in the playoffs on the 3rd of May. So, as we know, the Gwent teams have been really, really good, very positive. So first up then, Rob, what have you made of Super Rygbi Cymru so far? Has it lived up to your expectations?
Difficult one to sort of gauge, I guess, because I think it was a lot different sort of structure-wise and sort of the schedule-wise than what we're all sort of used to. It's very interesting that all 10 teams still had an opportunity come the end of the season. And obviously the focus was around aligning to the professional calendar and allowing that sort of player pathway to sort of thrive a little bit more than it did with the old sort of semi-pro Premiership. But certainly from the standard and definitely since sort of that Christmas, sort of the Boxing Day, New Year derbies have taken place, I think we've seen a very competitive league. All 10 sides have been put on a good show. From a Dragons perspective, 3 out of the top 5 teams, is absolutely fantastic in terms of their sort of player development pathway and their sort of future hopes. Obviously, we'll come on to it now, but there's a few players have sort of stepped up from a few of the clubs this season, which is always good to see as well. But yeah, I think it's definitely taken a step up from where we were last season with the Premiership on numerous sort of platforms.
And what are the crowds like, Rob, generally?
It varies club to club. The 3 Gwent sides are actually pretty good at home. Pontypool and Ebervale typically very well travelled as well. Across the board, I don't think anybody's really dipped away. Certainly all the negativity and sort of scaremongering around lack of fixtures and fans losing buyout at the start or before the season had started has certainly come to be false. There's probably a handful of clubs are increasing slightly, and obviously we're only talking a couple of hundred people, 400 or 500 people sort of mid-table sort of sides, and a few breaking that sort of 1,000 barrier every so often. But yeah, I think it's been promising that in a season where the season has been a bit muddled, I'll be honest. I think there's a lot of interesting time off, long layoffs with the under-20s and internationals obviously being non-playing windows. The cup has sort of fallen a bit early in the season, I feel. But all in all, I think from a spectator's point of view, I think we can see an increase next year, and certainly no worse than we saw last year with the Premiership, of course.
And is it the same 10 clubs next season? There's no promotion, no relegation.
So there's no promotion relegation as it is. There is a sort of clause that you have to withhold your agreements around the development and be a strong club. And obviously there's a few question marks people have thrown out around Cardiff with the finances. Obviously the WRU taking those on now has seemingly secured them the spot for next year. I don't think there's going to be any difficulty around the funding match from their perspective. There's going to be a 3-year cycle of this. So obviously, the end of every season, as long as all the clubs withhold their own promises, I guess, and sort of the contractual obligations, then we won't see anybody fresh apply for 3 years. And I think that's going to be the interesting part is, does anybody apply at the end of the 3 years? Because
the Cardiff region, for want of a better phrase, there wasn't much take up there, was there? Only Cardiff themselves, no Pontypridd, no Merthyr.
No, so Ponty didn't like the home fixtures. They felt that they weren't enough home fixtures. I think there's a few supporters have been a bit surprised by how many fixtures that actually have been played. I think to be interesting to see if they've changed their mind since. I think Merthyr have probably taken a step back. Stan Thomas is not pulling funding out of Merthyr. That's probably the wrong term, but I think he's cutting back. I don't think he's worried about chasing any big league funding and any sort of top of the sort of club game titles. But
because about 7-8 years ago he had deep pockets, didn't he? And he was pumping money into the world.
Well, like I said, that they've won the cup a few times, three Premiership titles as it was. They got a couple of artificial surfaces up there, brand new gym, new clubhouse that was 800,000 quid.
Really?
Yeah, so, half of that was put in by Sir Stan. So it's one of those ones. I think they've secured the facilities for their own club now, and I think that's what was more important for them. I think they're settled at the top of the community game. Obviously, they won the Premiership this weekend, just gone. So I don't think they're going to be wanting to come up. I think Pontypridd may reevaluate. They're top 3 in the Premiership, and obviously then outside of the Cardiff region, you've got Neath, who applied and were rejected. Yes. And that's obviously a different story again.
Neath, bless them, their social media has taken a hammer recently, isn't it? Oh dear, let's not go there. Let's not go there. So according to the WRU then, The aim of Super Rygbi Cymru was to bridge the gap between age grade and regional rugby, providing academy players with higher standard matches and more frequent playing opportunities. Do you think it's achieving those targets, Rob, so far, based on what you've seen?
It has. So for those in under 20s, they have seen 70% increase of game time heading into the Six Nations and 70% increase in game starts, which I think is crucial. We're seeing I'd like to say a lot more even distribution of players. I feel that is a slight change. It's still slightly skewed, and some clubs again an inconsistent sort of allegate not allegation, sorry, sort of
Allocation, yeah.
week on week. I think the numbers overall being given to each club are probably pretty good, but it's sort of how often they get those. Sort of another question.
So is it a bit kind of ad hoc? It's not a case of X player goes to this club, because what I've seen, there's been some variance, hasn't there, of people moving about.
Yeah, so each club gets an allocation at the start of the season. Obviously, I think that, you've got legacy players and sort of where positionals are best accrued. They sort of allocate out. Then you do have your senior players, your likes of Scott Cummins, Harry Wilson have sort of dropped down this season.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're a senior player. They won't get allocated, but they'll drop down for game time where it sort of fits. You've also then got weird ones like Sam Potter, who's in the Dragons Academy, plays for Ammanford most of the time, so therefore he's played for Newport and Llandovery this season at varying times. So it's a bit of a plethora of sort of how these sort of players integrate into the teams, but all in all, there is an allocation at the start of the season. It's sort of how they drift from that, I guess, as time goes by.
And like Philo's been using, like you say, using it for senior players, hasn't he? Because Steve Cummins went to Pontypool last week. Harry Wilson has played at Ebbw Vale. Solomon Funaki has played in Newport. Yeah,
He played for Pontypool as well for that. I'm sure he
Did
scored
he?
as well. I'm sure he did. Yeah, there's been a lot of controversy about that. A lot of people saying, why are foreign players playing in the Super Rugby Cymru? That's not what it's there for. What do you think of that, Rob, when Dragons let, guys like Cummins go to Pontypool in particular? That did annoy a lot of people. And it annoyed Dragons fans because we wanted him at Judgment Day, but also a fans saying, well, that's not really fair.
He got injured as well, didn't he?
He did, typically, yeah. How do you feel about it, Rob, having foreign players coming in?
So I think the key thing about the SRC was its main focus was on about young players developing through the pathway.
Yeah.
But it's also a place for, aside from coaches and officials to sort of get their teeth into a more senior game, somewhere for those either who have been out injured for numerous months. Harry Wilson, probably a prime example of that, coming into the Ebbw Vale squad a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Or, just, sort of someone who's, Funaki's probably a best example. They sort of come across, maybe they're not quite up to scratch the pro standard yet, or sort of having acclimatized to the sort of the physicality or the sort of the fitness levels of the game. And it's a perfect opportunity for them to sort of drop down. I think the most question marks get raised around these sort of players is when it happens to drop in a Pontypool Newport game, or it's Pontypool Ebbw Vale, and you go, well, hang on a minute, they haven't had them for the Swansea, the Bridgend, your Carmarthen Quins games that were 6-pointers. But when you're battling the sort of the teams in the top four, you're pulling in the sort of, I won't say seasoned professionals, but you sort of your senior
pros,
growth.
yeah. No.
Yeah, well, players like Funaki and Cummins are going to make a difference at that level. Harry Wilson, I didn't watch that game, but I know you did, Jamie, and
he was fine.
He didn't
set
stand
the
out,
world
did
on
he?
fire. He was fine. There was one nice pass to Rob Rees, wasn't there, when he scored that excellent try, in fairness. But he didn't set the world on fire. I thought he was okay.
Yeah, he had a good game considering Bridgend had their outside centre sent to the bin for 10 minutes. You're going to target that, Ebbw Vale did. And like you say, there was some nice link-up work for a couple of tries. But he wasn't that sort of player that you look at, and go, Jesus Christ, you can see he's a step above this level.
Yeah, fair enough. Something I've noticed this season, we'll talk about Pontypool in a bit, we'll start with them, but something I have noticed, I want to get your opinion on this. You have already mentioned, in fairness, about the allocation. So, as Gavin knows, when I run the Twitter account, I'll say there are 7 Dragons in the Pontypool set, or there are 5 Dragons in the Newport team, whatever. I have noticed that Pontypool seem to get far more Dragons players than any of the Gwent teams. Sometimes they've had up to 7 or 8. And then I look at Ebbw and sometimes you guys only have 2. And Newport have had 5 or 6, but Ebbw seem to get the least Dragons players. So why do you think it is, first of all? Why do Pontypool get so many? And why are Ebbw not getting as many as perhaps they should?
It's, if we look at Pontypool first, there's an interesting transition. So last season, Newport were by far the largest allocation of either, premeditated academy players or sort of senior drop downs. I think they were nearing 15 players last year that sort of dropped down. That sort of switched, and Newport had to sort of look at their budget and sort of play around with things. And it's all of a sudden they've sort of evened out the allocation slightly, but Pontypool probably have a bit more of a sort of, they've got a settled squad, but you look at the sort of the players that have come up and through, there's quite a few still there from the championship days. Obviously that would have been the second tier at the time. Obviously it's like coming up from the Premiership. There's a difference. So there's minutes and legs and, a different standard, whether that's something that the Dragons are sort of saying, listen, let's try and get somebody, into that position. I mean, a prime example is someone like Morgan Lloyd. He's training all the time with Pontypool, to the fact that the Dragons actually told him he had to train on the Thursday night where his brother Evan was playing in the cup final. He couldn't go up to Church Bank and watch it. He was down at Pontypool training that night. So there's, you can see there's a bit of a lack of scrum halves. I mean, Matt Flanagan had joined from Ebbw, played a bit at the start of the season, dropped off. So there's a few more gaps, I feel, at Pontypool. Then you look at the other end of the scale and sort of say, well, Ebbw, I think, has had 5 allocated pre sort of season, and obviously Harry Wilson to make it half a dozen. But I think there's a bit of old school politics on a bit of both sides, in fairness. I think there's an attitude from some of the coaching staff and Ebbw that, we don't want 6 players rocking up on a Thursday and just taking the shirt. It's not what the boys who train week in, week out, twice weekly deserve. And obviously, especially if they're not local boys, that's a bit of an ethos around the club's development plan. So that there's a bit of a stubbornness on that front, and sometimes it comes back to hurt them. But certainly I think when you look at 3 fixtures in 6 days, Harry Wilson played against Bridgend on the Thursday. He went on holiday on the Friday and then has seemingly disappeared off the map and is unlikely to feature again for Ebbw, given their centres are now basically back fit. So I think there's still a bit of work to do around relationships and that aspect of it. I think what's very interesting is, and it obviously doesn't tie up with the stats, but obviously Kerry Jones and Matt O'Brien are both involved with the Dragons.
Yeah, they are.
They're obviously both involved in their own aspects at Newport. So it's very interesting when you see areas like that come around, and you sometimes have to question, is there a slight conflict of interest? You'd like to think not, but I mean, when you've got key fixtures coming up and sort of the people making the decisions on whether, a winger's being dropped, into a club side is because he's going to be up against him on sort of the Saturday, there's definitely stuff like that needs to be worked on. But I think the relationship between the clubs and the region is better than what it was 3 to 5 years ago, at least. It's not harmonious completely, but certainly better, which is always a good sign.
I think sorry, Gav, go on.
No, go on, mate, honestly.
I was going to say, it definitely is better. What I like is they're featuring the Dragon's crest now. Have you noticed that on the team sheets next to players, which I think is a really nice touch. But I just wondered if Ebbw were slightly annoyed by that, the fact that Pontypool get all these players and they don't. Because it's something that I've noticed. Like I say, when I share the team sheets, I noticed the Pooler get a lot of Dragons players and Ebbw only get 2 or 3. But you're saying that it's kind of both ways, then, is there?
There's certainly a little bit of both ways. I think people do have to understand that. I think there's certainly an air of frustration around the club, and maybe from supporters and those on the fringe of sort of not coaching staff or board level, but sort of those who sort of pick up roles at the club. There's definitely a heavy frustration, and has been a frustration that's been aired rather recently, given the run of fixtures that Ebbw received. But yeah, I think there's there's always two sides to a story, and I think there's definitely work on from both sides, unfortunately. And it's difficult, right? Because as someone who's grown up, lives in Ebervale, goes to watch Ebervale quite regularly, you love the fact that we got 15 Ebervale boys out there. There's not we haven't been dropped into the Dragons, they finished second in the squad, or get to the cup final. But then equally, you have to understand that when the WIU give you £105,000 if you fund and match it, they're giving you that to develop, and you've got to accept the development role at some point. But also that then you're going to need players at some points. And Harry Wilson was the prime example. We could have done with a few more, you sort of feel, across the next week. But yeah, there's a bit of back and forth, I think, on that one.
And I think with Ebervale as well, there's always, and you'll know far better than me, but there's a historic thing as well, that there's always a slight disconnect, because I always consider myself to be quite rare to be a Valley's Dragons fan. When regional rugby started, I was quite happy to jump on the Dragons bandwagon because it made more sense to me, and I wasn't going to support Ospreys because, I'm not from there. But, well, you'll know yourself in Ebervale.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because a lot of people in Gwent do support Ospreys.
Well, I was just going to say to Rob, you think about regional rugby tops you see in Ebervale, you don't see a lot of Dragons ones up there, do you?
No, you do, and Cardiff have probably grown quite a lot. Cardiff and the Ospreys are probably quite popular. Cardiff more so from a physical support. And I think Ospreys, probably around the Galacticos and all around there. Of success, as back when they were sort of winning, gathered people. I don't think people drive down there a lot, but there's a lot as it was free to air at the time. A lot of TV support, but it's very rare to see Dragons sort of apparel in and around Ebervale, and I think there's still our feeling. I mean, the club game and a lot of sort of probably rugby on a whole is an aging population, and certainly the club game, the volunteers, and they're struggling with at some clubs, and there's still attitudes from 2003 that unfortunately will never be shifted. Doesn't matter what you do. I mean, I speak to people on the regular, and it's it's the same old argument, and I don't bother engaging with any debate, because you're not going to change someone's mind that believes that Newport and the WIU screwed over Ebervale 22 years ago, and they're still deliberately setting out to cause Ebervale to lose. There's only so much you can fight these sorts of things, unfortunately.
As I was told about 6 months ago when I was up in Ebervale, when the Dragons top in the spoons, and a bloke came up to me who I didn't know and said, "You shouldn't wear that around here, they fucked us over."
Right, mate. Okay. Okay, mate. Yeah, whatever. Oh dear. Right. Okay. So let's go through the Gwent teams then in the Super Rugby Cymru. Let's assess their season. So let's start with Pooler. They finished 5th in the table. Notable players: Sam Scarf, Ewan Rosser, Dylan Keller-Griffiths, as we know. I know Ryan Jones is playing here as well. Morgan Lloyd, of course. Rob, what have you made of Pooler this season?
Do you know what? I'm a bit frustrated at Pooler is probably the best term. They've got a really good squad, a strong allocation, and it's not like it's a lot of players have been allocated and they're weak. I mean, Dylan KG and Sam Scarf, have had a couple of games this season in the front row together, and they're senior Dragons players, obviously not playing a lot yet because they're still young, but they've got a really good squad, and I don't think they've particularly moved anywhere. They certainly haven't regressed down the table. They're well clear of Aberhaven and sort of Bridgend outside of that top 5. But they also feel like they're, a good month or 2 months worth of fixtures away from breaking into that sort of top 4. And that's similar to the way we finished last season. And obviously they had 2 points deducted last season for an RGC fixture that didn't go ahead as planned. But you just get that feeling that they need to be kicking on now. This is a good squad. I mean, the likes of Mikey Herbert, Scott Matthews, Morgan Allen. There's a lot of aging players in the squad, and yes, there are a lot of young players as well. But you don't want to lose those sort of players without having that opportunity of kicking on. Pontypool, I won't say struggle on the road, but that's where their weakness is. Pontypool Park is a fortress.
Yeah.
They've beaten Cardiff there. They've pushed Llandovery close. They've beaten Ebervale there. The last 2 seasons, they've picked up wins against Newport as well. So they don't lack wins against the top four at home. They need to do better on the road against those sort of teams. But if they could just close that gap and be a bit more clinical and a bit more ruthless on the road, then I just get that feeling they push into that top four. And if you've got, a really good, vociferous crowd that Pontypool have, they're one of the few clubs that have that brilliant support and in the numbers that actually affect a game, they could actually be looking at silverware. But first they got to close that gap and sort of find a way. And it's not impossible. We've seen Ebervale look to close that gap. This is probably three years into a plan. They was exactly the same, sitting back off the sort of the top three by a significant way. It's now time to try and push on and get into that sort of home quarter-final stage, because ultimately now they've got a trip to Llandovery, which is going to be on S4C, the actual channel for those who don't sort of engage in SRC rugby all too often. So that's going to be an absolute corker. But that's probably one of the few pieces, on any of those top four sides you really don't want to play at one of their grounds at the moment. But yeah, it's they're still in for a chance. I think they would have wanted to have done a little bit better in the cup. I think they're that sort of side that really relish those big games and those big moments. And I think that the cup sort of lent itself to that this season. But if they can just close that gap on the top four, that's what they need to try and do now, because this is 2 seasons of it that stayed the same. No, don't get me wrong, if they go on and make the semi-final or final, obviously that's going to be a progression. But based off the performances that we've seen this far, in the season, I don't think we're going to see huge progression, certainly not in their sort of placements.
Okay. So as you mentioned there, Pontypool all the way to Llandovery. Your prediction on that one? Because you've just said Pontypool are not very good on the road and Llandovery are pretty decent, aren't they? So how do you feel that's going to go?
Yeah, I just feel that at the moment, Llandovery have got all their weapons firing. I mean, they've had a bit of a shaky few results, this past month. Swansea and Bridgend have both beaten them, both on the road. Churchbank has been well defended, stoutly defended ever since they gave the shield up to Ebervale right back at the start of the season, their first game. And other than a Cardiff hammering, I don't believe that they've lost a league game at Churchbank this season.
It's a fortress, isn't it?
It
Very tough
is.
place to go. Yeah.
It's one of those ones that they've got the weapons to hurt you, right? They're one of those few sides that can be, a sitting duck sometimes. You think, oh, Christ, they're not playing very well. And then out of absolutely nowhere, they'll string 4, 5, 6, 10 games together and you go, this is the Llandovery side that did the double the other year. It's still the same side,
So you're predicting a Llandovery win then, Rob,
Yeah,
unfortunately?
yeah. Unfortunately, I think this one is a Llandovery win.
Okay, fair enough. Let's hope we're all wrong, of course. Right then, moving on to Newport. They finished third, having a good season so far. I've watched a couple of games over at Newport Stadium because Spitty's just down the road for me. Newport always look a well-drilled and a well-coached side. I think Ty Moss is a really good coach at that level. What have you made of the Black and Ambers this season, Rob?
Slow burners to start. I think they struggled to put 80 minutes together for probably 6 months of the season, but they're a dangerous side. They were, for me, one of the top 2 favourites going into the season. They've got one of those big ruthless packs, and we mentioned about what the Dragons lack. That the likes of Josh Skinner in that second row. I'm not saying he's going to be standing up to pro level anytime soon, but when him and Rinard Landman started the season off together, everyone was looking at a rather ominous team. Obviously, they've got a lot of weaponry behind, and they've lacked probably a 10 this year, or consistent 10 up until late, with Jack Lloyd has finally sort of nailed his name on the back of a jersey and is stringing some top class performances together. So I think the halfback inconsistency slowed them down, but at the moment they are the best side. They are on pure form. They are the best team in the SRC. They are again similar to Llandovery. Have got sort of plenty of try attacking options. They can burn you with pace. They kicked Ebervale off the park. Alternatively, they didn't run us off the park. They didn't push us off the park. They kicked Ebervale off the park. And that shows a lot of game management coming in, and the Kerry and Gareth have got them thinking. Matt as well, doing a bit of work with the back line. There's a lot of thinking man's rugby there, and they've obviously got the home tie. They've got Aberavon going down to Spitty, and yeah, that's one of those sort of fixtures that you're looking at going, Newport on a bit of a roll here. Aberafon have been playing some stout defensive and really nice rugby recently.
Mm.
But I think this one is actually going to be a Newport win, and it'd be interesting to see how much they transition on. They're in the same side bracket as Cardiff for the semi-finals, so that could become very, very tasty.
Yeah, absolutely. I am impressed with you, but I do think they're a very good team. I've always wondered if someone like Lloyd Lewis could step up to pro level because he's absolutely electric, isn't he? And when he played for the Dragons development side, he looked really, really good. And I know Ty Moss was saying, well, there could be an opportunity for him to step up to pro rugby. I don't think it'll happen, but he's
No, well,
always an impressive competitor at SRC, isn't he?
oh yeah, I mean, you think I think he's in three-figure tries for club rugby. Obviously, he was Pontypool for years before, but he's come off the Welsh Seven scene. That's what he was. He was
Yeah,
back in the day before they changed all of how all that changed and went to GB. So he's got absolutely bags of pace, but he's so sharp. He sees where the space is. He's not just someone who you give the ball to and he'll just run round somebody. He does pick out space. He's very clever with how he counter attacks and how he uses his inside options. And that's something that I wish he's one of them players. I wish we'd seen him in a Dragons jersey 5 years
yeah,
ago. I think he's had his form for years. Um, he would have had plenty of tries, I feel, and he's probably fallen a bit unlucky that the Dragons have had options at sort of winger. I mean, Jared obviously still scoring after a bit of a barren patch, but he's well up there. Ashton Hewitt, when he was fit, was
yeah.
was scoring lots of tries. He's probably fallen slightly unlucky, and again, probably a victim here of Welsh rugby's low budgets. You can't take risks or bring in the additional players that you would if you had a couple of million quid extra a season.
No, that's right. I've always liked the look of Ollie Andrew as well, the young Dragons winger at Newport. I don't know how many senior opportunities he'll get, but he's someone I quite like. Nick Thomas is, you know,
Yeah.
a becoming star. They have got a lot of good quality Dragons youngsters, Harry Ackman as well. And so you mentioned Jack Lloyd earlier. He's Johan Lloyd's brother, for those who don't know. Do you think he'll make the step up to pro rugby, Rob?
I think what he needs is 2 years of leadership under Matt O'Brien. And if he develops as quickly as he has the past 3 months, I think he's got that shot. I
Mm,
think he's very raw at the moment. He's a bit like his brother, he's very skillful and he can do a lot that people go wow to. He's got that wow factor that can
the X
light up.
Factor, yeah.
But at the moment, he hasn't controlled enough games this season. He's starting to do that and he's starting to dictate play and run his backline. And that's for me where his biggest work on is. He's got the kicking game. He's got the distribution. He's got that sort of edgy pace, and he wants to take it in it, on himself to sort of make some hard yards. If you can, manage his backline, I think Obi will be working with him on that. Then we could be seeing some potentially sort of step up into that role, and that's where the Dragons and Newport sort of bond has been very interesting around 9 and 10 coverage. Obviously, Will Reed has sort of gone through Newport, the past couple of seasons. I think he's played 1 or 2 games in Newport this season, so hardly at
Mm.
all. And it'd be interesting to sort of see how that sort of pans out. And if the Reed experiment doesn't work, where is Jack Lloyd in 2 years' time, when you're sort of re-looking at sort of Reed's contract and saying, well, have we got anyone better if this doesn't work out? So there's an opportunity there for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shea Hope, of course, at Newport, and he's been doing pretty well for the Dragons, coming off the bench
Yeah.
and making an impact. So he's developing well.
Well, that's actually another difficult one, right, for the Dragons, because you've got Shea Hope's a season ahead of Morgan Lloyd, but Morgan's absolutely on fire. So it's
Mm,
it's how long do you hold off Morgan from senior game time? Obviously, he's already got some in the bag, but you can't give Shea and Morgan or your game time at 9, right? So
yeah.
it's very interesting when you look at the wider and more experienced scrum halves in the senior squad and how that again is going to be balanced in seasons to come.
Yeah. See, I've had this conversation with people about Shea Hope and Morgan Lloyd. I actually think Morgan Lloyd is a better player,
Yeah,
and I think he will overtake Shea at some point. But like I said, Shea is probably just a little bit ahead of him
yeah,
at this moment in time, isn't he?
yeah. He's probably 18 months ahead or so, but it's
Yeah.
one of those ones, right? If Morgan has a really good run now with the Dragons, he's busted into the sort of squad. He's been travelling reserve in a few games as well, so he's probably appearing in more senior squads than people realise. He just doesn't get in the 23s. He's he's number 24. So he's probably the one to watch, I think, out of all the sort of the Gwent backline prospects. Morgan Lloyd is probably the one that we're watching in the SRC the most.
Yeah, absolutely. So Newport, as you mentioned, at home to Aberavon, and you're back in a Newport win then in that one.
Yeah, I think Newport will get the job done. You and like you said, I think at the moment the way it's looking elsewhere, we'll set up a lovely tie at the Arms Park against Cardiff.
Tasty, lovely stuff. Okay then, Gav, senior years prick up now. This is your moment. Moving on to yours, Gavin's boys, Ebervale. Steelmen finished second in the table and are SRC Challengers Shield winners, beating Swansea 21-17. Come on then, Rob, tell us about Ebervale. Are you happy with the season so far? You must be.
Yeah, I think is where we've spoken about Pontypool making that sort of next level up. Ebervale this season had to level up. They had to get more wins against the top three. They had to break into that sort of top two of Llandovery and Newport. And obviously Cardiff have made the step up as well this season, which has made it a little bit more difficult. And they've done that. They've done the double over Llandovery. Obviously, they lost to them in the cup final quite convincingly. They've split wins against Cardiff and they've split wins against Newport and obviously pipped Newport in the cup as well. So it's 11 games at home this season, 11 wins. Always bodes well when you've got potential quarter-final and semi-final at home. If all the sort of the seedings go as expected. And I think what Ebervale this season have finally done is accumulated a bit of backline. They've always been renowned for a big pack, and I don't think Ebervale will ever change from being renowned as that sort of club. Right, going back to the 60s and 70s with Gareth Howells, played over 600 games for the club. You look back at all the big players and all the players that have been capped. Dan Lydiate, he didn't play many times, but again has come through Ebervale and sort of that sort of player.
When I grew up watching them in the 80s, yeah, it was kind of Baxton again looking, got the 10, walloped her up the field, line out, rolling more.
And you know what? That's exactly how this season sort of looks on paper. I mean, you look at the stats. Joe Franchi, first choice hooker with 17 tries. Ian Morris, second choice hooker with 10 tries. This is just the league. I think there's 3 tries, penalty tries, that came from the rolling maul.
Rolling maul.
So it's effectively 30 tries have come from hooker this season, or more if you include the cup. So it's a very interesting prognosis that you think, well, Ebervale are a one-trick pony. Unfortunately, they're not. They probably do lack depth at 10 and at the moment at 9 with a couple of injuries to Griff Tuff and John Evans. But Cam Davis is one that has really shone this season. Obviously, the Dragons dropped him from the academy last year. He really was an allocation to the club. He's actually an Ebervale player now, and he's really stood up to the mark. And you sort of begin to wonder, with the lack of great 13s in the Welsh pro game at the moment, was it a slight mistake, or will he be having another chance at some point? You've got Harry Rees-Weldon, again, has sort of been in and out this season. Obviously, he's been heavily involved in the under-20s camp, so he's not played as consistently as Ebervale may have hoped for, an Ebervale sort of youth player. But, with someone who's obviously another allocation, come off the back of a really good Six Nations, the couple of games that he sort of got involved with, and he's looked dangerous. Obviously, try of the season winner for his effort against Newport. So, they're a pretty well-rounded squad, and I think Jason Strange before the season wanted a home semi-final, and that was his opportunity. They said if they can get a home semi-final, there's a chance that Ebervale can win the league. They travel very well. A trip to Cardiff on May 18th, which is a Sunday, is nice for supporters. So there'll be a lot of rugby to play before then. Obviously, Carmarthen Quins come down this coming Sunday. That's obviously a big task, given that Quins held them. Quins were leading at Eugene Cross, less than a month ago at the 70-minute mark before, Ebervale run riot. So that's certainly not a gimme. And then you've got the winner of Llandovery and Pontypool. So that could be very tasty if Pontypool do get the winner at Church Bank, because the last time the clubs met at Eugene Cross, there was nigh on 4,500 people turned out. So, we could be in for some really exciting rugby. And actually, going back to, put my rose-tinted shades on you, the good old days of rugby where, you did have thousands of people turning out for your top-class, club rugby.
And you were saying, Rob, the team's mainly from kind of round Airborne, those kind of Eastern Valleys, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's sort of always been the ethos. You want boys who are local who can put the time in. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but the likes of Adam Williams came back up from Cardiff. He's in the medical profession, and he lives down in Abergavenny. That's relatively local when you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
Gwynevid's not local, but just up the other side of the moors. You on your way to Brecon. They've had a few players come through, and sort of play at the club, Bramau again. Sort of they've got some really nice ties, and obviously coaches as well.
Yeah.
Steve
Well,
Lang has gone,
Paddy's gone up there as well, hasn't
yeah,
he?
he's gone up to sort of take on Bramau, and they've
Yeah.
actually had a decent sort of reprisal since. They've been really struggling this season. Obviously, Damien Hud's, typed the last time Ebervale won obviously the Premiership as it was, the top league for the clubs in Wales. Damien was in charge. He's obviously up at Bramau, and they've used Bramau as the sort of breeding ground a bit, sending players there for game time. So there's certainly a club that wants that community ethos and sort of requires it. I don't think Ebervale are a club that works with a Galacticos. I don't think they can buy people in. The players know the supporters by name, and the supporters know players by name. It's that sort of feel at the club which.
It's not a place you get to by accident, is it? It's
No.
somewhere you have to want to go to because it's not really on the road to anywhere else.
And that's just it. It's, players got to want to be there. And that's what the coaching staff want from them. It's not an easy place to be and play. At the end of the day, if you'll know as well as anyone, Gav, if you live in Ebervale, you can expect snow in March and April.
Yeah, absolutely.
Training on Tuesdays, Thursdays, playing on a Saturday at home. That's a hell of a shift, 3 days of the week in absolutely awful weather for 4 or 5 months of the year. So it's an interesting one, but yeah, I think it's certainly a very happy club at the moment. Disappointed in the cup final result, and I think if anything, winning the Shield was a massive sort of target for them, especially once you started getting past Newport, Cardiff, Llandovery, all of those sort of sides. The big ones, once you sort of start to go, hang on a minute, there's a chance here that this is staying at Ebervale all season. And I think it's appropriate that, the original Challengers Shield stays with the club that's the only club that's unbeaten at home this season across all competitions.
Fair dues. I was just thinking about friend of the pod, John Evans. Is he still injured? Is he still involved in Ebro?
Yeah.
I haven't seen him on the team sheet for ages.
No, so he'd done I think it was his shoulder against Bridgend away back in late September.
Yeah.
Turned against Llandovery in the cup final, and within 2 minutes, done his Achilles heel.
Oh no, poor bloke. John, if you're listening, sorry about that, mate. He is a listener of the pod and used to friend of the pod. Oh, John. I was gutted, Alice.
He's still around the clubs. He's recently had his third kid, I think it is.
Fair play.
From all sort of aspects, I think it looks good that John will be sticking around for at least another season. Obviously, plenty of experience there, and what he can pass on in pure knowledge is priceless.
Yeah, good bloke, good player. One of my favourite guests we've had on. If you're listening, John, hi. So, everyone got Carmarthen Quins at home. You must fancy that one, Rob.
Yeah, I think this is one to get stuck into now. This is a couple of weeks off, well needed break. Ebervale, needed a lot of injuries, a lot of fatigue, mental fatigue as well. It's been a long season. The loss of the cup final can take it out of you and having to re-go straight away. So it's good. Like I said, there's a really good vibe at the club, and hopefully now they said they can kick on and we'll start to see Ebervale's speciality, I guess. Knockout rugby one game at a time, as Chippy likes to do.
Okay, then. So before you go, Rob, we're going to put you on the spot. So the teams left now: Cardiff are playing Bridgend, Ebro Carmarthen, Newport Aberafan, Llandovery against Pontypool. Who is your winner to win it out of all those teams? I suppose Cardiff are the favourites, aren't they? Or are they or not? They probably are, aren't they?
I would say Cardiff are favourites, and the fact that they can, as long as they win, they can play the final at home. That's a massive factor. Ebervale have obviously looking good on the other side of the draw. Llandovery have got their own artificial pitch. There's all this sort of battle around, surfaces you've got to play on. Unfortunately, that does take a toll at this level. So Cardiff are definitely favourites, I think, and probably likely to go on and win.
Rob, can I just ask about that? Do you think one of the reasons Ebro's won so many games is because Eugene has always been quite a heavy ground, I'll put it politely. I do think some clubs, particularly those that used to better playing surfaces, sometimes struggle on it because it's not really built for running rugby, is it? Well, certainly, all the years I went up there.
Yeah, it certainly plays a factor, and probably a little bit less so on the running rugby, but more around the set piece interestingly. I think the scrums, especially this season, we've seen S4C name the entire Ebervale front row in their team of the season. That's a feat I don't think has ever been achieved by anybody. And I think that's interestingly where it comes into play. Very few clubs have got into Ebervale at set piece time, at Eugene Cross this season. And I think just that difference, and you can see it vice versa. Then when they go away, you can see how sides, Newport and Rodney Parade or Cardiff, obviously years gone by, the likes of Merthyr and people like that sort of claw back an advantage then when they're on the road. So it's certainly plays into their hands. And again, it's one of those ones. The bank gets in good voice, and it's worth an extra 7 points when you have a crowd like that behind you. 100%.
It's a difficult crowd to play in front of, and always has been, hasn't it? I remember the Toulouse game. God, when was that? 99 maybe. And the weather was terrible, and the crowd were just giving Toulouse so much stick.
Yeah, and it doesn't change, right? I mean, the crowd level has varied since then, ultimately, but that bit of well-natured banter towards opposition players, and again, it's a knowledgeable crowd.
Yeah.
At this level, you find a lot of opposition supporters know the opposition players. There's sort of banter with names. The officials get it every game, whether they're having a good game or not. Every time ref always comes out after the first penalty. So it's one of those ones, and it's that's what a lot of people go to the rugby for these days. Is sort of the crack you can have with your mates, with fellow supporters, with opposition supporters as well. It's always good when you get a sort of a following turn up, because ultimately I think it always drives a home team support to be louder. But ultimately you having a bit of back and forth and sort of there's a bit of niggle. There was at the Pontypool game. Ultimately, there's always going to be a bit of supporters niggle when you have a crowd's ultimately that big. But that's what it's all about. Getting into people and making it uncomfortable, I guess, for the opposition, and partisan is probably the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, quite right too. So, are you saying Cardiff are going to win Super Rugby Cymru? Is that your prediction?
Well, I'm actually saying that Ebervale are going to win, but
oh, what a surprise! Didn't see that one coming. Okay, now, Rob.
We'll leave the bookies, and if Gavin can support Cardiff and Llandovery and all of the teams before the end of the season, there's a few thousand pints might be coming his way.
I'll put my Ebervale support on hold until the end of the season.
Yeah, until the six pointers on hold.
Anyone but Cardiff, that's what I say. Anyone but Cardiff. No, anyone in the Gwent sides, please. Ebu, it'd be great to see Ebu win it. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Okay. This has been fun. It's nice to talk about something different, actually. So, thank you for coming on, Rob.
Yeah.
Where can people? Yeah, great to have you. Where can people find you if they want to follow you on X and Facebook and all that kind of thing? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm Rees Rugby on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Do obviously most of my stuff from there, and then obviously the SRC podcast available on Apple,
Yes.
Spotify, YouTube, same platforms as the Dragon's Lair, and all other good sporting podcasts under the same name. But yeah, it's one of those ones. Always up for a well-natured debate and chat, and rugby always sort of hosts that.
Yeah. No, it does. You're quite right. Yeah, do check out the SRC podcast. It's very good. Rob, thank you for joining us. We'll leave you now. Take care and goodbye. Best of luck to Ebu for this the rest of the season.
Don't say anything, Gav. Don't say anything.
Come on, Llandovery.
Reverse psychology, see? That's how you got to do it. Brilliant. Cheers, Rob. Thank you. Ta-ra now. There we go, Rob Rees. I like talking about different stuff other than the Dragons all the time. And I've said to you, I like talking about sort of community rugby a lot more, and very interesting chat.
Absolutely. And,
so,
now I'm a Llandovery fan till the final. The curse of Gav.
I see what you're doing. Okay, let's do the Gwent Rugby Roundup, shall we? Gav, what's the
Sure.
latest?
So, not lots, but some games, and I've got quite a few things on Gwent Rugby Roundup. Let me just grab my other notes. Division 1, Newport High School Old Boys, 17, Abergavenny 43. Into Division 2, nothing in the Premiership or SRC.
No.
Or Division 2, not a high-scoring game. Blackwood 9, Abercarn 0.
One for the purists, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. Cardiff 29, Caldecott 24. Into Division 3, Machen 49, Fleur-de-Lis 0. Newport Saracens 58, Oakdale 12. And Rumney, our Rumney, not the Cardiff one, 49, Chepstow 19. Division 4, lots of points in Division 4. Crumlin 25, Betws 20. Gwynyfed 76, Crowcowell 5. The Moors Derby there. Llanillough 67, Bedwelldy 7. Whitehead 45, Fordside 0. Division 5, also plenty of points in Division 5. Beaufort 48, Abersachen 18. Hartridge 17, Blackwood 57. Blackwood Stars, that is, sorry.
Good win.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, that is correct. Tredegar Ironsides 19, Maygo 17. Nothing in Division 6, but in the Dragons Athletic League, the Reserve League, Gwynyfed Athletic 12, Bedwas Athletic 35. Annesty Rats 20, Monmouth Druids 0.
Excellent.
And a couple of other points from our friends at the All-Stars. The 3rd of May, Dragons All-Stars travel to Melksham to defend the Bath Rugby Foundation Cup. And on Wednesday, the 14th of May, from 6 p.m, they take on Swansea Gladiators at Rodney Parade with the aim to avenge the game that ended the All-Stars 18-game unbeaten run 2 weeks ago at St Helens, Swansea. And then the final point on the Rugby Roundup is I have a bit of a personal request. So, as I've mentioned many times, I am one of the coaches at Hastings and Bexhill RFC, under 11s going into under 12s. And I would like to tour to Wales next season. And having spoken with my fellow coaches this morning, we've decided it's a good idea. So if there is a club in the Dragons region that would like to host us, please get in touch through the club's socials on Twitter or on Blue Sky, and I'll see if I can arrange something. I'm looking to take our under-12 boys up there, play a bit of rugby, hopefully go and watch Dragons if there's a home game available for the weekend we arrange, and give my lads an experience of a proper rugby culture.
Excellent. Yeah, if you can help, please get in touch, because yeah, that'd be good for you guys, wouldn't it, to do a rugby tour that way?
I think it would just our under 14s went up and they played up in Swansea. They were playing Swansea Uplands over the weekend, and I think they've had a great time of it. And my friend who's the coach there, who's a teammate of mine in our club side, he said to me, it's just a really different rugby culture, and I want our boys to experience that as well. My lad clearly has experienced it. He's been around Welsh rugby fans and stuff, but I'd like all our other lads to experience it.
No, absolutely. Like I said, if everyone listening, if you can help, then please get in touch, and hopefully we can sort something out. Right, just before we move on then to what happened on the weekend, if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to subscribe. We're on all the usual podcast platforms, and we're on YouTube as well under Wrap. So please like, share, subscribe, and tell your mates about us, because it all helps to grow the pod. Right then, Gav, let's talk about the weekend. Ospreys 57, Dragons 24. 9 tries to 3. It was 14-10 at halftime. Dragons played well for the opening 25 minutes, I thought. We were even on top in the scrum, believe it or not. Yeah, there was a couple of soft tries in our first half, led Ospreys back into it, but 14-10, I'm thinking, pretty decent, not bad. And then the second half happened. 47 points were conceded in that second half. So, yeah. Your thoughts on that game?
So I didn't see the game live. I was watching Hastings lose, which was great, but I watched it after. Well, I watched it today. First half, really competent performance. Just like you say, a couple of soft tries, but we actually looked in control of the game. Your set piece was solid. We've had a bit of back and forth about it. Kind of Angus isn't the 10, but I think his kicking was great, particularly that first half. Really, really did get us around the field, manage territory. Second half, I don't want to be unnecessarily critical, but it was a terrible performance. It just lacked shape. It lacked leadership. It lacked any form of structure. And like I was saying, my friend Luke was watching the game, because they'd taken in the 14s up there, and he sent me a message saying, "Do you not have an attack coach?"
Well, it's only what Dragon supporters are asking as well, to be fair. So.
And this is a bloke who's never seen Dragons. And he was our attack coach this season. My club's do you not have an attack coach? Because like the second half, I had no idea what was going on, because we seemed to be absolutely blowing out our rear ends. Our heads went. Discipline was poor. The South African winger, is he called Kasende?
Dan Kasende, the postman, always delivered.
Well, we made him look like Cheslin Colby's slightly better South African palate, because he was waltzing through stuff, and what, and this is a team that last week I saw really struggle against Cardiff. They didn't look good against Cardiff, and we made them. Well, no, we didn't make them look like world beaters. We just looked inept.
In the first half, I thought, you could tell Ospreys are still lagging. They do look a bit laggy. They look a bit tired. But second half, well, can we just call a spade, Gav, right? You say I don't want to be too critical. Can we just be honest? That second, it was embarrassing, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Let's be honest, it was an absolutely embarrassing second half performance.
The way I was thinking about it, like, we aren't professional sportsmen, but we have jobs with a level of responsibility and accountability.
We do, yes.
If we performed as poorly in our jobs as that, we wouldn't be getting another chance.
And they lost the aerial battle, didn't they?
Yeah, completely.
And to be fair, Dan Kasende, he was excellent in the air, but we just couldn't get a grip in the aerial battle. Struggled at the breakdown. The scrum, I thought, first half was actually pretty decent. Even Chris Coleman was winning penalties. A fair play. I think his scrummaging has improved. I think you've got to be honest and say it has. Second half, just the scrum went to shit. It was just what we've seen from the Dragons for years, isn't it? Just really inept front five.
Yeah.
I mean, that has got to be, when you looked at the front five before kickoff, that had to be the weakest front five in the URC that weekend. If you compare it to every other team's front five, that had to be the weakest.
Let's be brutally honest, right? Let's be brutally honest.
Do it. Okay, say what you want. Say what you really think.
That's not a URC tight five.
It's not. It's Super Rygbi Cymru, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Front five.
And you look, Leinster put their third team out, but that tight five looked well organised, well drilled, and they lost to a well organised Scarlets team.
Great result for the Scarlets. Against the third string Leinster team. It's still Leinster at the end of the day.
But that Leinster team, that Leinster tight five would have more driven ours all around the park, and that was their third string. And look at the teams that are at the top. Leinster, their first choice tight five, destructive. Glasgow, destructive. The South African side's destructive. You can't compete if your tight five's not there.
No.
And ours can't compete with Ospreys, who are in 11th.
But to be fair, though, the Ospreys have always had a strong pack. They've always had a good front five. So it was always going to be a struggle. But that front five we named. And I get it. There are injuries. It's who's available. It's just not up to the standard. I don't want to personally call out players, but we all know who these players are. It's not up to the standard required. Even the bench was weak.
Oh, yeah.
The bench was so weak. There was nobody on that bench on Saturday who was good enough to come on and make an impact, apart from maybe Hugh Anderson. He's the only player who could maybe come on and change things. But
Yes.
Shea Hope did okay when he came off the bench in fairness, but there's no game changers on that bench at all. Nobody's making a real impact.
No.
And that's been a
And,
problem throughout the season. The bench is so weak.
and I think Shea Hope and Morgan Lloyd are probably where we should be thinking rather than Dane Blacker in future.
Yes, absolutely agree.
Yeah, it's I don't think there's any, less blood those guys. And the new George North, Hugh Rees Weldon, like he looked.
Don't do it, Gav, please. Don't turn it. Don't turn into Wales Online on me now,
I
please.
did that. I did that ironically.
I know you did.
Yeah,
Don't do it again.
but he's a good prospect. And Evan Ross is a good prospect. So there are truth there, but honestly, it's that we have to strengthen. We can't keep putting benches out like that. And someone like Levi Douglas, I'm thinking, well, if Ben's fit, Screech is fit, and we've got him on the bench, well, yeah, that's great. But that fitness thing is a concern for me as well, because consistently we've been, I'm looking at your list, we've been consistently between 14 and 19 players injured every week.
So let's talk about now, and we have to add context to this. This wasn't mentioned by hardly any media outlets, by the way, when I read the match reports. The Dragons had 20 players missing. 20 players missing, right? We know we've got one of the smallest squads in the league. We know that we have a paper thin squad. We also know it's one of the weakest. When you take 20 players out of that squad, it's going to have a huge impact. It's going to make you less competitive. But do you think that Dragons having 20 players missing excuses that performance on Saturday? Did they get a pass from you, Gav?
Oh,
Because
no.
they got 20 players missing.
No, because you still have to do your job, don't you?
Yeah. No, I agree. So the Dragons' defense was woeful. 28 missed tackles, a tackle success rate of just 69%, which is incredibly low for a tackle success rate. Compare that to the Ospreys, who had a tackle success rate of just 82. Of 82%. Ours was just 69. Theirs was 82. So big difference there. And some of those tries in the second half were very soft, particularly Keelan Giles' try, Dan Edwards' second try, and Kieran Hardy's try in particular. Very soft, very preventable tries. This has been a theme throughout the season as well. Why are Dragons' second half performances so bad? What is being said at half time in the changing room? Who are the leaders in that changing room, right? Who is doing the talking? Who is the one standing up saying, "Look, boys," and giving the team talk? Because why do they always come out in the second half so meek? Who is the guy? Is Philo leading the charge there? Is there Ivan Owen as captain? Who is the strong, domineering voice in that changing room? What's being said at halftime to have all these meek second half performances? It's been a big concern all season, Gav, isn't it? How they've just failed to come out for the second half.
Yeah, we're being honest. Let's be blunt about the quality of coaching, isn't there? Is it? Kind of, and I don't want to be overtly critical of Philo because he's doing a hard job. But it's not got better.
There's been a lot of comments
yeah,
about Philo on social media. You've only got to read the replies to Dragons again on his social pages and the forums as well. Gav, a lot of people are just not buying into Philo. A lot of supporters just they don't think he's the right guy. I'll be honest, I don't think it was the right decision to hire him as a head coach.
I totally agree.
I don't want to call people liars. I got to be very careful what I say in this pod. But when they said that they've had a lot of interest from coaches, I don't necessarily believe that. I don't believe that they conducted a proper search of head coaches. I think they wanted Philo from the get-go. And I think that was the plan. I think as soon as he arrived to Ronnie Parade, the owners wanted him as head coach there and then. And they waited for Dai to fail. And that was their opportunity to bring Philo into the hot seat. That's how it felt to me. It felt to me like they've always wanted Philo.
So let's assume that we're going to give Philo the same time that we give Dai. So what's that? 1.5 seasons, 2 seasons?
Yeah.
So if they want it to work, which, I'm saying, of course they wanted to work, the owners, we wanted to work. He has to have better people around him. He has to have experienced coaches who can improve the players we have, because we can bring in who we want. We can bring in Thomas Young. I absolutely loved his some of his antics against Munster on the weekend as well. But
Still a class player.
yeah, Thomas Young, all these guys. But unless the coaching is there, it won't. The young players won't kick on.
It's the elephant in the room, Gav, and so many supporters are talking about it. Everyone's talking about the coaching. I have had so many messages from people who tell me we look a poorly coached team. I've mentioned
Yeah.
this on the pod for honestly, all my mates say it.
Well,
My cousin said it the other day. He said, "You guys, you don't need a marquee player. You need a marquee coach."
My friend who went to see them, I don't know, in Kenny, he was at the Swansea.com, and he just sent me a message just saying, you are you being coached, kind of thing, and he's good, he understands rugby. He's an experienced player and experienced coach. And he would say, he's never seen us play before, and he said, "Have you guys been coached?" And for me, there's some really key bits. Coaching, we have to get sorted out. We have to get that but there's also some recruitment stuff. So I think we're doing the right stuff around the tight five, and that needs to continue. And I was thinking about this when I was watching the game today, and centre is a key position for me. I love an Iron Owen. I think he's a great player.
He is, yeah.
Joe Westwood and Harry Ackerman have the potential to be very solid players. But we need somebody in the centres who's experienced, has done it, is a game leader. Because I don't know, because I'm not a defence coach at Dragons. But who is the trigger person in defence? Like when you coach a defence, you have a trigger person, the person who organises it. Generally, that's 12 or 13. Will be a defensive organizer. I'm not sure that's there. If we could get a good centre, an experienced centre, who can act as that defensive coach, defensive leader, and organise the line, that will make a difference. And they need to be a good player as well.
Yeah.
But you want a
we used
game
to be
savvy.
stacked. No, you're right. We used to be stacked at centre.
Yeah.
We had Max Clark. We had Theo Tompkinson. I'd kill for Theo Tompkinson now.
Yeah.
I think he's a player we could really do with now. But I really do think we've missed Steph Hughes.
Yeah, and Scott Williams, kind of, he was doing that work on last Saturday, but he can't do it forever. If we're going to get a marquee player in, and I've seen back three, we don't need in the back three, we've got tons in the back three.
Yeah.
We've got talent to spare in the back three. Think about the centre. Think about an experienced centre who's solid in the tackle, and that will make a difference.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, Scott Williams is not going to be available for the rest of the season. Philo was confirmed because of that injury at Judgment Day, so he's not going to be available for the South Africa tour. So it just sums up the Dragons season. It has been a disastrous season, Gav, hasn't it? This has been the most joyless season I can remember as a Dragon supporter. And not the fact that we're last, because we've always been sort of scrapping at the bottom of Zebra anyway. And there was always going to come a point where we would finish last. But to be so far off the pace as we are, to be 20 points behind Zebra? If you imagine saying that at the beginning of the season, that we would be 20 points off Zebra, we would have laughed you out of the room. I mean, it's grim, it's depressing, it's embarrassing is what it is. It's absolutely embarrassing that we're in this position. We look we just look miles off the pace compared to the other teams. Miles off the pace.
If we could get relegated, we should almost.
Yeah.
Because we are not playing the same game as, we're not playing the same game as the likes of bloody Cardiff and Scarlets, never mind the Leinsters and the Glasgows and the Bulls, who are playing an entirely different game anyway. We are not competing.
Yeah.
And we have become less competitive since Dowie went.
We have got worse since Philo took over the hot seat. I'm not blaming it all on Philo, but I can remember when we did that emergency podcast, when it was announced his departure. I was on holiday at the time. Remember that? We hastily
Yeah.
put together that emergency pod. And we said then, this is going to make no difference to performances or results. And it hasn't. Well, it has in some ways, because very few we got worse. It has been a total disaster. I really don't like this team at the moment. I don't like watching us. We're not resilient enough. I don't see enough fight. I don't see enough dog. Watching the Dragons right now is like watching a tragic comedy. It's like watching a Roy Anderson movie. You know, it's just utterly depressing. Funny at times, but utterly depressing. And this season just needs to come to an end, doesn't it? Soon as possible for all our sake, because I have never been more embarrassed and frustrated and disenchanted with a Dragons team as I have with this one. And I know we've been hit really hard by injuries, but like you said, Gav, they're still professionals. You still got to do your job. You still got to be competitive. And right now, the Dragons, they are not competitive. What we've got now are 3 professional pro teams. We got Cardiff, Scarlets, and Ospreys punching above their financial weight, giving it a good go. They're involved. You know, they're fighting for the playoffs. And then you got us at the bottom, limping behind.
We've become
Same old, same old.
We've become a development team almost by accident. You know, just we're bringing in all the youngsters, and you know, we aren't really designed to be competitive. We've almost become the thing that some people say we should become by accident. We've stumbled into becoming a development team.
I don't pay my season ticket money for that, though, Gav. I'm not
know,
paying
and that's what
my money to be a development team. I'm not doing it.
And that's what I was going to say. You know, it's easy for me. I watch on Premier, you know, like kind of I go up once, twice a season if I'm lucky. You're there every bloody week. You know, Gareth's there every week. You know, so many of the guys who regularly comment on the show, you know, Dino's and all these other, you know, Dino and Lee and all the other guys who regularly comment on the various forums. They're going every week, and everyone deserves better.
And it's not enjoyable. I don't like it. I do not like watching this team. I really don't like watching them because they're so poor. They're uncompetitive. The skill set is low. I have never disliked the team as much as I have this one, honestly.
But
really
what's it like? What's it right now? What's it like? Angus, great player. You know, and Iron does everything he can do. Some of these youngsters coming through, but you know, they're individuals. If you ask me, well, how would you describe Dragons' playing style? I couldn't. And I've watched every game of the last 2 seasons. You know, kind of generally twice.
They've got no identity, Gav. I've been saying this for ages. You haven't got a system. They haven't got a style. They got no identity. They're just a mess. They're an embarrassing mess this season. And we got to call a spade a spade. It's not good enough. It really isn't. So I asked listeners to do a 3-word review for this game. I'll give you time to think about yours, Gav. Mine was embarrassing second half because it was. It was embarrassing. Let's have a look, see what our listeners said. Chris Langan, end season now. Yes, unfortunately, though, we can't go to South Africa. It won't get any worse, surely. As Mick McCarthy once said, you can. Sean Imson said, business as usual. Matthew Williams said, let it end. Mike Mafflin said, poor halftime coaching. Goes back to the point I made earlier. What is being said at halftime? Who is the voice? Who's standing up? Who's giving the team talks? Why is this so, you know, meek in the second half? Why is it so uninspiring? Nick Foyle said, sad to see. Kaya O'Sullivan James says, complete coaching overhaul. Yeah, Gav?
Yeah,
complete coaching overhaul.
Yeah,
she's right, isn't she? Gav Haycock said, what you expect? Well, I expected them to be a bit more competitive. I didn't expect them to beat the Ospreys, not with 20 plays missing, but I just expected to be a bit more competitive. That's all. Is that too much to ask?
No.
Clearly it is. Well, clearly it is for this lot. Greg Carter, I give up. Yeah, I think a lot of people are doing the same. Rich Ryan, sadly lacking bounce back ability. That's a mouthful. What else have we got? Steve gets in touch. Steve Shasner says, embarrassing and humiliating. Phil Cox, absolutely bloody awful. Yes. Andy Hossack says, get Toby Booth. He ain't coming to the Dragons, Andy, not in a million years. I love Toby Booth to come here. I'm a big fan of Toby Booth, as everyone knows. He's not going to touch us with a barge pole, unfortunately. And I don't even think we'd go to him. I don't even think we'd have
He's
the
not the
vision
coach.
or the idea to go,
Yeah,
hey, you know
yeah.
what, Toe, fancy coming down to be.
He's not the coach we need either.
Oh, I don't know. I take him. I take Toby Booth.
We need somebody who's going to just be horrible to us, and then we'll find a way. It's going somebody who's just going to break us down into tiny pieces before building us back up and into something gnarly and battle scarred, because we aren't at the minute. And he's not that coach. He is not that coach. You know, kind of. There will be a coach out there, and I've got no obvious person I would suggest, but just somebody who's going to say, no, I'm going to work you into the ground and you are going to become better players, or you are never going to play again.
We need a Dean Ryan type character, but someone who the players don't hate.
Yeah.
That's basically what we need, don't we?
So somebody who does that hard work, but in a way that doesn't make players want to throw him off the Clifton suspension bridge,
Nigel Dando, an awful season. And then finally, Calvin Hunt says, not good enough. Gav, do you have a 3-word review for Saturday?
Far too weak.
Fair enough. So next up for the Dragons is a trip to South Africa to face Stormers and Bulls.
Oh, brilliant.
Stormers put 60+ points on a good Benetton team.
Yeah.
Bulls are the Bulls. I was watching Gloucester Exeter today. Gloucester put 79 points
They did.
on Exeter.
13 tries.
Thomas Williams, so good.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm watching this, right? And I'm thinking, this is going to be the Dragons in South Africa. I'm not just saying this now, right, to be over the top or to over-exaggerate. Particularly, though, with the Bulls. I can see the Bulls putting 70 points on us. Easy. If they put 60-odd points on Seabra at home, imagine what they do to the Dragons. Are you with a religious man, Gav, at all?
Not really.
I was going to say, so I'm baptized Church of England, right? It's a long story, but I had a proper dunk, full immersion, everything.
I'm Roman Catholic by kind of upbringing, but
so I haven't been to church for years. I might have to go to church when the Dragons go to South and pray, not for a win, or just pray for a miracle that they're competitive at least. That I'm going to pray that they don't embarrass themselves with 70, 80 point plus defeats. Seriously, though, it could end up being very, very ugly, couldn't it?
Oh, my mate, one of my mates I play with, Ash, is a Stormers fan, and he's already said we're going to score about 70 points against you.
Oh, I bet he's licking his lips. If you're a Stormers or Bulls fan, you know the Dragons are coming to town. You are licking your lips, aren't you? And it's a shame. It's a real shame. It shouldn't be that way. But we're just not respected enough, and we're not good enough.
Well, we aren't. It's as simple as that. Not good enough is the 3-word review for the entire season.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Interesting chat with Rob, and good to speak to you, Gav. Thank you very much for joining me, as always, and thank you to our friends at Riverside Sports Bar for their continued support of the podcast. We'll be back sometime next month. Don't know exactly when, maybe towards the end of the month. I think we'll look back on the 2 South African games, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and then have a chat about the season and what we think, our thoughts and how we move forward. Because I think we can all agree as Dragon supporters, we want the best for this team, but it's just it's been a disaster, isn't it? And something has got to change.
Yeah.
But we say this every single season. That's what's making me more and more skeptical now. We have all these good signings. They look good on paper. We said this last season, Gav. We liked our recruitment. It'll be better next season. Every season is the same. Nothing changes. And that's why people are starting to get very, very tired of the Dragons. Sorry, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how it is. Okay, we'll be back sometime next month. But until then, thanks for listening. And we'll catch you on the next one. Ta-ra.
Bye.